Good morning, guys. So I thought it would be fun to do our video outside today. The weather has been so nice, and I just want to enjoy it. So today's topic is about trauma, and I did indicate this is a serious topic. Not serious as in like I'm not going to be like inserting jokes and things like that, but it is something to take seriously. It is something to be aware of. It is something to take into consideration in your own life. If you work with clients, if you have family or friends who act a certain way, or you just want to understand them better, you have to be able to understand trauma. So first, I really wanted to define trauma. Trauma, and this is my own definition. This isn't some dictionary definition. This isn't a definition I looked up. I'm just going to try to define trauma how I see fit and how it's kind of unfolded in my own practice as a social worker. So how I see trauma, it can be something that impacted you in such a way in that it changes you, whether that's behaviorally, mentally, physically, emotionally. That can be any or and beyond. So an experience, a situation, a moment in time, some kind of event in your life, whether you were a witness, whether you were a victim, whether you were the perpetrator. Like this is not an easily defined definition. It's not, oh, this happened to you and that was traumatic. It could be anything. It could have happened to you. It could have happened to somebody you loved. It could have been something you did could be traumatic. Okay, so this is a very broad, all-encompassing definition. So the key factor is it changed you in some way. If you did something and you didn't think twice about it after that, it impacts you in no way, shape, or form, whether it's conscious or not. Of course, you're not going to know if something unconsciously impacted you, but we're kind of just trying to define what it is. If it's impacting you, we typically think of things like, death of a loved one or seeing someone get hurt or killed, physical abuse, sexual abuse, those kinds of things as traumatic, but it really does go very far and beyond that. So I don't want to get too into just trauma and what that is. I'm pretty sure we all have a general idea of what it is, but I just wanted to start kind of explaining what I feel trauma is. So basically, how does that impact our lives? How does trauma impact the way that we act, we think, we interact with others? Because it really does. It bleeds into all areas of our lives. So I want to start with how does it impact us in our relationships with others? So again, I'll give an example, most relatable example I think that there is. Let's say that you have experienced a relationship that was unhealthy. Someone was physically abusive to you. So physical abuse can be, obviously it's a physical traumatic experience. It can also be an emotionally traumatic experience, a mentally traumatic experience, okay? It impacts all of yourself, okay? So now maybe you don't trust. You develop a distrust in maybe males or potentially people in general. You develop a distrust in relationships because you might end up developing a toxic idea that, okay, now every time I'm in this kind of situation, aka a relationship, or aka a relationship with a man or a woman or whoever perpetrated the physical abuse, is now unsafe. It means this situation equals abuse. This situation equals I'm going to be hit or punched or kicked or whatever the situation that occurred. So that is how we can develop these ideas of that this equals that, because that's an experience that happened to us, right? So now maybe moving forward in relationships, you think I'm going to be hit. So you don't develop the natural healthy connection and bonds that need to be established in order to have a healthy relationship. So that impacts how you interact with others, because you come into relationships or you come into, meeting somebody, getting to know somebody with your guard up. Now you have a guard. Now you're not open to getting to know somebody as they truly are, because you already think that they are a certain way because of what you've experienced. Additionally, you might always be on the defense. Let's say you guys get in an argument completely unrelated to any kind of physical abuse or anything like that. You might already think that they're in the wrong, that they're a bad person. So you might make up arguments for no reason. You might be trying to protect yourself from being hurt so much that you want to perpetrate the hurt first so you can gain some control. And control is a really important idea in this talk, because Someone who has had control taken from them is always seeking to have control because it was taken from them, now they want it back. So they always feel the need to have control over every situation because that was taken from them. And you guys need to be able to understand these things because you might look at a controlling person, and this isn't always the case, so I don't want to excuse anyone's behavior. If someone is just very controlling and that's an unhealthy situation for you, please don't take anything I say and use it as an excuse to stay in a situation that's not safe for you. Okay, I just want to lay that foundation right there. But it is helpful in aiding our relationships, and this doesn't always have to be romantic relationships. It could be friendships, it could be client provider relationships, it could be familiar relationships, it could be any kind of relationship. Okay, but you have to be able to understand that, okay, I'm dealing with a controlling person. Maybe if it's beneficial for you and that person or your relationship, or just knowledge wise, understand what that person might have been through, or get to know what that person might have been through, and that might help you understand why they've developed these such controlling behaviors. So someone who has had control taken from them in some kind of way, same with sexual abuse, someone who took advantage of your body is a sense of, is a form of control. So you had control taken from you, you had no control over someone doing that to you, and so you're going to be seeking to gain control back or to have control in every future relationship that you engage in. Another point is, I feel like trauma impacts the way that we behave. So outside of relationship, let's say that, you know, a traumatic experience happened to you as a kid, you were in a car accident. Another general example. Maybe you're afraid to get in cars. Maybe every time you are in a car, let's say you don't even realize that you have a traumatic experience related to cars because you didn't realize that car accident impacted you in that way. Maybe every time you get in the car with somebody, you're jumpy, but you don't even realize it. Maybe you just think, oh, I'm a backseat driver, you know, like, because I think that you are seeking to get control again. You're in a passenger seat now. You're no longer the driver, so maybe you don't trust getting in cars where you're not driving. Maybe it's you need the control to be the driver. Okay, so you can see how this can impact any kind of situation, whether it be the typical thing that we think about with an abusive relationship or, you know, abuse of some kind, to something as simple as riding in a car. So the trauma can impact any kind of situation or event in your life. Okay, so this is not specific to one category or one area or one event or one occurrence. Okay, so I really want to touch on some of the things that you guys had questions about. One question was, how can you help someone after they have been through something very traumatic? My first thing about that is, you don't know what somebody needs. Someone who has been something through traumatic, very traumatic, may not need a bunch of people being like, hey, I'm here for you. I need, like, it might seem like the right thing to do, and maybe it is. I'm not saying not to do that, but I'm just saying if you don't get the response that you expect, maybe it's because that person just needs to process this situation before they can allow other people in to process it with them. A lot of times we make the mistake of overcrowding people who have been through something traumatic and they don't even understand it enough themselves to be able to let somebody in to help them through it. I would say ask questions. After some time has passed, if you get to know this person, if you know this person well enough to know that, okay, yes, this is what they need me to be there for them, then ask, what is it that you need from me right now? I wouldn't assume, I wouldn't just say, oh, this is what I would need at this time, or this is what, you know, my friends need or my family typically needs at this time. I would ask, what is it that you need from me right now? How can I help you best through this situation? Because every single person is different and every single situation is different, and everyone experiences every situation differently. You might know that person in every situation that you've ever seen them in, but that doesn't mean the next situation that happens is the same as the 20,000 that happened before that. So just ask questions of how can I best help you through this time. Let's see. How to recognize trauma, when to seek help. Okay, so you can't always recognize trauma. It's kind of like you can't look at somebody and be like, oh, you're this, or oh, you're that. Like, unless it's, oh, I have brown skin, like that's something you can observe. Trauma is not observable. It might be more pertinent or more at face value if you kind of think about the kind of behaviors talked about already, you know, being jumpy in a certain situation or avoidance is another symptom of trauma. But you don't know, unless you know what happened to that person, you don't know that necessarily to associate their behavior with they've experienced trauma. So that one's kind of tough. But again, if you know somebody well enough, you know what they've been through, you know that they have experienced something traumatic. Maybe they've talked to you about it, they told you it was traumatic. Because another thing that we make the mistake of is like, oh, this happened to this person and that was traumatic for them. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's true. Someone could experience something that we as a general population think is extremely traumatic, and to that person it's just another day in their life, and that's extremely sad. But at the same time, we have to understand that not everything that we think is traumatic to every individual. I could go through something that I don't think twice about, and someone else could be like, "Are you okay? I can't believe that happened to you." And I'm just using myself as an example, because maybe I don't think that's traumatic. Maybe I've been through that so much that now it's just a part of my life, and I'm not saying I just accept it as my truth, but maybe I'm so desensitized to that it is no longer traumatic for me. It doesn't impact me the way that it did the first time it happened. You know what I'm saying? So don't make the mistake of thinking that, oh, that happened to somebody is traumatic, because they don't equal. So when to seek help? If it's you, I would seek help as soon as you realize that something is impacting you in a negative way. So it's never too early to seek help. I think as soon as you feel that you have been impacted in such a way that now it is impacting your daily life, or even before it gets to that point and you just say, hey, I don't even know how to process what happened to me, that's not the best time for everyone to seek help, because some people have a hard time voicing to someone else when they can't even understand it themselves. But if you're the type of person that needs to process stuff through things with people, like I am, then maybe seeking help as soon as possible to help process that is for you. So I would say it's never too early, but there is definitely a too late when it starts impacting you to the point where you can no longer function normally as a result of the trauma. And I want to touch on one more: how trauma can be passed down through generations, because this one's important, guys. If we do not heal, and I mean truly heal, or at least make efforts to heal, we can and will pass down trauma through generations. There is such a thing as multi-generational trauma. So someone who has experienced something traumatic or seen something traumatic or just had a traumatic life, because maybe they've seen so much trauma and there was never not trauma in their life. They got so used to it that desensitization that we talked about earlier can be passed down. Maybe you're so used to trauma in your life that you feel like, I don't need to work through this anymore. It no longer bothers me. And then you have children, but it really was bothering you. Just because it was no longer traumatic from you doesn't mean that that first time that it happened and that second time that it happened when it was traumatic and you never, healed from that, doesn't mean that you can't. It means that you'll pass that down. So you have children and then you don't realize that, oh, I really do have these, traumatic reactive behaviors that now my children are learning, or now that my nieces and nephews are learning. So let's say you never learned to develop healthy relationships after that first abusive relationship. So you perpetuated this idea that all relationships were negative and all people are out to get you, and every relationship equals hurt. You pass down those ideas to your children, and then they develop idea thinking of, oh, I've never even seen a healthy relationship, because every time I have been a daughter to my mom my entire life, I have not seen a functional relationship. So they will grow up with the idea that relationships are a certain way. They're negative. They are harmful to me. They are X equals Y. So these are just small examples. There are so many cycles that we generate in our families and in generation to generation, because we did not heal from what has happened to us. So again, also another thing that you can pass down is coping strategies. If you don't know how to cope with your own trauma, because again, you're desensitized to it, or you just cannot face it because it's still so traumatic for you, your children can and likely will develop poor coping strategies. So if they then experience trauma, they won't know how to handle it, and they will not be able to function as a result of their trauma. And that's how then with their children, it just continues. and also how we handle trauma in the help seeking process. So if we think, oh, this happened to me, it's not leaving my household, or I don't want to tell anybody about it, I don't need to process it with anybody, no one that's not my family needs to know about it. So if you have this idea that, therapy or seeking help is a negative thing, then obviously you're teaching your children that. And then when they have a problem, maybe because they're different from you, just because that's your child and you raise them doesn't mean they need the same things you need, and doesn't mean that they heal the same way you heal. They are different. So maybe your child is someone who needs to process through something with someone completely unrelated to them, completely detached from them and the situation. We can give them an unbiased third party opinion about something and relate to them on a level that someone so close to them can't. But they now have developed the idea that, oh, I can't do that because, no one in my family does that. No one seeks help. Seeking help is like a sign of weakness or whatever the case that may be that they may have been taught. So we can also pass down these ideas that when I do experience trauma, I don't have an outlet into which that I can process it outside of the household or outside of the family, whatever the case may be. So just be very cognizant of all of these kinds of things about trauma. And guys, we can talk about trauma all day long. This is literally the basis of my field that I'm going into. So, but I'm going to cut the video here. I feel like it's a good stopping point. And this is a topic we can revisit. If you guys have further questions about trauma, you want to learn more about trauma, you want to, know more about the signs and symptoms, or the, process of how to, develop coping strategies as a result of trauma, whatever the case may be. This is a huge topic that can't possibly be covered in one video unless the video was like 6 years long, So there's textbooks and endless resources on trauma. But I hope this gave you guys a little bit of a first look into trauma, if maybe this is the first time you're talking about it or thinking about it in any kind of way. And I'm so excited to have you guys here. Keep sharing, liking. I'm here for you guys. So any suggestions, shoot them my way. Otherwise, I will plan on seeing you guys next week.